Hey, what's up guys? Joker here, and I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be doing another video on Red Dead Redemption 2, taking a look at the different graphics options in this game, comparing low, medium, high, and ultra performance, and also you'll be able to see the visuals as well on your screen with these side-by-sides. And I'm also going to go over my optimal settings for getting a smooth 60 frames per second in this game, which I was able to achieve. I am personally playing on a 2080 Ti at 4K, but all the testing done in this video was done on a GTX 1080 Ti at 1440p for all of the different graphics comparisons that you're going to be seeing here in this video. And with the settings that I am personally using, I am getting a very smooth 60 frames per second, and at many times running even well above 70, even 80 frames per second. And the loss in terms of visuals has been very minimal, while the gains in terms of performance have been very good in this game that is ridiculously taxing to run. Some might even argue that it is unjustifiable, and some people may even say that it's a bad port, which I am partially in agreement upon, as the visuals in this game, while they are impressive, I really don't feel like they warrant the hit that we're seeing in performance all that much. And like I said, you can really get in there and tweak a lot of options. There's over 40 graphics options for this game for you to be able to tweak, and a lot of them really don't make that much of an impact on the performance, which is frustrating at times because you really want to go in there and just find that one killer option that's going to give you a massive boost in performance. Unfortunately, there really wasn't that many of them that I could find, but there are some things that you can adjust, like shadows, the volumetric quality settings. There's also a water physics quality option, which appears to be almost completely broken, as having that on just butchers your frame rate immensely. So we're going to go through all of the optimal settings, but you'll be seeing the low, medium, high, ultra comparison on your screen right here. And as far as the presets are concerned, the preset bar that's in the options menu is going to vary what it sets your actual settings to based on your hardware, and that's coming directly from AMD, who I was talking to yesterday. So if you set it to the maximum quality preset, or maybe you put it in the middle of the balanced preset, what that preset does is going to be very different for the options below that based on the hardware that you're using. So if I just tell you to run it on the middle balance setting, if you're running a different graphics card, then you'll very likely see a different result based on the GPU that you're using. So you really want to get in there and manually tweak all of the different options to be able to get the best performance possible on your system. So that's what I had to do here, is I had to go through one option at a time through the different benchmark runs and set them all manually to low, medium, high, ultra, and restart the game in between each run to go ahead and run the benchmark. And as I said, this was on a 1080 Ti paired up with an i7 8700K, which is clocked at 4.8 gigahertz, also running 16 gigabytes of RAM at 3200 megahertz, and I was on the latest game-optimized driver from NVIDIA, which is 441.12. And at the end of the benchmark runs, you can see here there's a drastic difference going from low to ultra, not only in the visuals that we're seeing there, the graphics on low are just absolute potato. It honestly looks worse than console. And I don't mean a little worse, I mean a lot worse. Like, running this game on low basically makes it look like San Andreas on the PlayStation 2. It is absolutely awful, and I would not recommend anyone playing this game on low on the PC. I mean, you're maybe getting a better frame rate than on console, but at that point, I would feel honestly just go out and get it on the Xbox or the PS4 and play it on there at the locked 30 frames per second, because low looks just horrendous, and I would not wish that on my worst enemy. While playing on a mix of medium and high settings is actually really good, which is kind of what I'm doing in my optimal settings, and there's also some options you could raise up to ultra without seeing a very major performance impact. Like textures is something most people are going to want to just leave up at ultra, as the textures in this game are one of the most drastic things that are affected by changing the graphics options. But as you can see at the end of the benchmark run here on ultra, with everything pushed to the right as far as it can go, we got an average of 46 frames per second and a minimum of 18 on the 1080 Ti at 1440p, while high setting sees that jump all the way up to 62%, and the minimum comes up to 26. Going down to medium, we get an average of 72 frames per second with a minimum of 36, and at low, we get an average of 86 frames per second and a minimum of 41. But there were still drops during some of that testing there, where, like, during some of the snowy bits, even on low settings, where the frames were coming down below 60 FPS, even on low. So like I said, you're really going to want to get in there and tinker around and find the best settings for your setup. But I'm going to go over now the settings that I was using for my optimal settings, and then I'll show you a benchmark run side by side with that versus, let's say, the high preset. I think would be a good way to compare, because I think most people would probably think to drop it down to high if they're not getting a good performance on Ultra, which is probably going to be most of you out there, unless you're playing on a 2080 Ti and then playing at 1440p or below. You're definitely going to want to probably tweak some settings down off at Ultra, and I'll explain here which settings you're going to want to do that with. And right here, I'm on my main system with the 2080 Ti at 4K, but ignore that fact. As I said, all the testing was done on the 1080 Ti system. I'm just recording this here at my main PC because this is where I got my mic set up and everything. But you can see we have VSync off. Everything in here is turned off, although having VSync on if you're using a G-Sync or a FreeSync display will be ideal, of course, for benchmarking. That's not really what we want to go ahead and do. And as far as the graphics settings, these are what I am using here, and I'm going to leave screenshots down in the description below as well. So if you want to just go ahead and open those up and then take a look at them when you're in game and go through them, since there are a ton of graphics options, as I said, there's over 40, and I'll go through these and explain why I adjusted some of them here. Obviously, textures, you're going to want to leave that up at Ultra in most cases, unless you maybe are limited on VRAM or something. The textures definitely make a major visual impact and really don't affect performance all that much in my testing. Anisotropic filtering is another one. You can leave that completely maxed out at X16. It's literally like zero impact. Lighting quality and global illumination, you're going to want to run it high. And some options you are going to want to run down at medium. Things like shadow quality, far shadow quality, ambient occlusion, and reflection quality. These are all very taxing settings that you're going to want to leave down at medium. Mirror quality I have set to high. The water quality is set to custom because in the advanced options, you can do some tweaks in there to further make it run better on your system. And then volumetrics and particle quality, these are definitely going to be some very demanding options. Volumetrics are hugely impactful on the performance, and then particle quality is also going to take a pretty big hit in some of those more snowy areas of the game. Tessellation, I was able to leave it Ultra, and for anti-aliasing, I'm just using the temporal anti-aliasing on the high settings. Even at 4K, that's absolutely fine, and there is very little performance impact. Yeah, FXA also would not have much performance impact. I just personally don't like the way it looks. MSAA, if you're using that, you are going to take a very, very large hit to performance. So I would advise most people to stay away from that unless you happen to have performance to spare if you're one of the lucky people out there. When it does come to API, I would suggest using DirectX 12, even though in my video yesterday it showed DX12 and Vulkan were pretty close. I've experienced a lot of stuttering when trying to use the Vulkan API, and I've seen other people out there on the forums, on Reddit, and in my comments section yesterday echoing that as well. So I would advise most people to go ahead and use the DirectX 12 API, which you can adjust here in the advanced graphics options as long as you set the advanced settings to unlocked. By default, that is locked. If you set it to unlocked, you can adjust anything in here like the volumetric resolution, far volumetric resolution, and volumetric lighting quality, which I have all toggled down to medium for my best settings. The Raymark resolution for clouds, you're definitely going to want to turn that off. Huge impact to performance. A few other options in here like the lighting, soft shadows, and grass I have all set to high. Long shadows and full resolution screen space ambient occlusion I have turned off completely. It doesn't, I don't know why you would care about seeing shadows at a mile and a half away. It's not necessary, and it does have a large impact on your performance, while you will very likely never notice it in terms of visuals unless you're really looking for it at some long draw distances. Water refraction and water reflection I would turn down to medium. Water physics quality, this is an option which I feel is almost completely broken at this point. Any part of the game where there's water on the screen, you can get a hit of like 15 to 20 FPS, and honestly, you don't spend that much time near the water, and it's just not worth running until they fix it, or maybe it'll just stay broken forever, and maybe it really is that taxing, and it's doing some stuff in the background that we can't even see, because when it comes to visuals, I can't see any difference. Resolution scale, I have that completely off, although they do have a lot of, you can really get in here granularly and really adjust your resolution scale if you want to. And when playing at 4K, I found I can get a really nice boost in performance if I drop that down to 90% resolution scale or 0.9, and then use the NVIDIA Freestyle filters to up the sharpening, which makes it basically look like 4K, and I can gain like an extra 10 to 15 FPS in performance if I'm at like 90% or 80% resolution scale. So that's definitely a viable option if you want to go ahead and do that and use the NVIDIA Freestyle filters. TAA sharpening I have maxed out. Motion blur I have off because it's just completely ugly. Reflection MSAA is off because, well, we're not using any MSAA anyway. And then other things down here, like the geometry level of detail, grass level of detail, I have those completely maxed out. Tree quality, ultra. Parallax occlusion mapping at ultra, I found no performance impact with that. And then decal quality, I have it high. Fur quality is at high, and that's the highest that one goes. So those are all of the settings that I was using for my optimal settings on the 1080 Ti rig, and it's what I'm using also on my main system with the 2080 Ti at 4K, staying above 60 frames per second. It runs absolutely beautiful, as you'll be seeing here in the benchmark run, even in the snowy parts of the game, during the snowy parts of the benchmark, which is absolutely brutal, and on pretty much any other settings, it runs down around 30 frames per second. It stays up well above 60 frames per second here because of the tweaks that I did here in the options and going through the over 40 graphics options, which took all day yesterday. So those are the settings I would recommend most people to use. There are very, very few parts of the game where I've seen the frame rate come down below 60 frames per second on the 1080 Ti at 1440p. And then on 4K, there was like maybe 1 or 2 areas during the first like 2 hours of the game up in the snow where I saw some drops down into 50. But I'm playing on a G-Sync monitor anyway, and honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal to me personally. And these are the best settings that I could come up with right now. Obviously, if you're still having trouble running the game, I would go into these options and maybe some of the ones besides textures that are running up at ultra. Try knocking them down to high and see where it is. Try knocking down some of the slider bars like the geometry level of detail and the grass level of detail. Try knocking those down about halfway and see if it gives you a boost in performance. But there are definitely certain ones in there you're going to want to tweak. Like I said, the volumetrics, the shadows, the ambient occlusion, definitely the water physics quality. Knock those things down. I know a lot of people were, had a lot of high hopes for this game. Everyone's really excited for it. And of course, we'd all love to be able to go in there and just whack everything up to ultra, even on especially on a high-end rig like something that I'm running, and just be able to play the game at a smooth 60 frames per second. But sadly, that is just not the case, as this game is just very, very demanding. And as I said, some people might argue it's unoptimized, and hopefully maybe we get better performance as time goes on. But I have a feeling we might see some gains in performance maybe in the coming weeks and months with optimization either from Rockstar or through future driver revisions. But I'm not that optimistic about that, but I'd love to be proven wrong. So sadly, if you had dreams of playing this game on, at 4K ultra settings, I think you're probably going to be waiting for a 3080 Ti or maybe even a 4080 Ti to be able to do that. This was kind of the same case with GTA 5 when that game first came out. It was just absolutely brutal to run even on high-end hardware. I believe I was running 2 980 Ti's in SLI when that game came out on PC, and I was playing at 1440p, and I was not able to maintain a solid 60 frames per second with that rig. But eventually I got a 1080 and then a 2080 Ti, and now I can play that game over 100 frames per second on 4K, completely maxed out without an issue. So that might be the case with Red Dead Redemption 2. We might be waiting a couple of years to be able to see this game fully taken advantage of. But even with these tweaked settings here, it still looks a hell of a lot better than console. And as long as you're able to run the game and are willing to tweak some options, you're going to get significantly better performance than a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One, which have a maximum of 30 frames per second. And as you saw here, you can definitely achieve 60 FPS if you're willing to tweak some of those options. And then on top of that, we've also got mod support. There are already mods out there. There's a mod that allows you to play Arthur Morgan as Joker, and there's a couple of other minor mods as well, like just basically like save files if you want to skip over the first 2 hours of the game in the snowy bits, which is honestly understandable if you've already played the game on console. As I've already beaten the game twice on the PS4 Pro, I went ahead and downloaded that save file as well so I could skip ahead to the part where you get to Valentine in Chapter 2, because the first 2 hours of the game, if you have already played it, are extremely boring. So yeah, that's why I chose to go ahead and do that. And yeah, they're all over on Nexus Mods. I'm sure there's going to be even more mods as time goes on. Maybe even some performance optimization mods. That would be really nice to see. But I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys. As always, I look forward to your comments, feedback, opinions down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on it. Subscribe if you're not already. And yeah, ring that notification bell so that way you never miss a moment of content when it goes up live on the channel. And I'll see you all tomorrow for another video.